I think the challenge that some companies might have, some startups might have, is that they move so fast, they don't really take the time to distill that why in a way that it can connect to people outside of that startup. You can see the spark when someone is talking about something that they're passionate about versus something that's rehearsed, or maybe it's just an answer to, a classic interview question. As a startup specifically, I think it's really crucial to understand where you are in the market, what is your position, and what you can offer from that position.
Welcome back to Talent Hunters, powered by MRI Network, where each week we talk with the world's top talent strategists and executive recruiters. If you want to build talented teams that drive your company to big goals and big growth, then this podcast is for you. And now, let's join the conversation with today's episode of Talent Hunters.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Vince Holt, the host of Talent Hunters. And today I'm excited because we have Elena Stefanopol, the Senior Director of Talent for Labelbox, located in San Francisco, California. Welcome, Elena.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So could you please give us just a brief background of yourself and what got you to where you are in your career journey today?
Yeah, happy to. So I think as, many talent professionals, I kind of fell into recruiting first. And I started pretty lost after university, not really knowing what to do, as one does, I guess. And I started volunteering for an international student-led organization. And I opened a new branch of that organization. So it was just me with 4 other people, volunteers, students, and with no budget. And we had to make it happen. So we had to recruit volunteers for our chapter. We had to do marketing with no budget. So that was really the point where I realized how much goes into finding the right people for the right task. And we had to think, creatively and realistically, why would anyone want to join our organization? Like, what are they getting out of it? What is the experience? What makes us different from other student organizations, and so on? And I think those are still very valid questions. Just replace, student organization with, company. And you talk about candidate experience and all of that, very relevant stuff right now. So that really allowed me to learn a lot of things back then and really have that as a solid foundation for what I really value even to this day when it comes to recruiting. And then also having this holistic view of how talent influences the success of any organization. So I could see, if I had the right people in place, we were able to reach our goals. And if we didn't, then we didn't. So that was a very clear correlation there. And I really do believe that talent is the foundation of all companies. And if you want to be successful, you need to make sure that you have the right people in place. And you also give them the space for them to be their best self at work. So yeah, after that, it was really kind of just digging deeper into recruiting. I was in London for a couple of years and recruited for a consultancy when DevOps was starting to become a thing, which I know that was kind of a long time ago. We don't really think about it anymore. And then I moved to San Francisco, and that's when I really got into tech. And I partnered and consulted with a few very small startups, really specifically on that foundational piece, how to set up your recruiting process, how to think about recruiting for a company, and so on. And then I moved on to Airbnb, where I worked with Joe Gebbia in building the team for Samara. It is now a separate company, so it's spun off into its own thing. But it was very cool because it was still in an R&D phase back then. So I was recruiting for something that I couldn't talk about with candidates. So they only knew what they were joining after they signed the offer letter, essentially. So that was a very cool experience as a recruiter. And yeah, then I got to Labelbox, where I was their first recruiting talent hire. And my whole mission was to build recruiting for Labelbox. And that was I think what I was gearing up to do, my whole career. So here I am.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Now, can you give us a brief description of what Labelbox is all about?
Yes, of course. So our mission is to build the best products to align with artificial intelligence. So, we are part of this crazy landscape with Gen AI, but we were part of AI before the crazy moment with Gen AI. So the company started in 2018. And back then, the industry looked very different. It was very much focused on data labeling. So, very high level for any machine learning model to work. You need to have appropriately labeled data so it can actually leverage that data and continue to develop and improve. And we were focused on that niche, which really, it's again kind of foundational for the whole industry. And as Gen AI, showed up on our radar last year, everything kind of changed. But in terms of how, what we do, we still build products to enable our customers to use and leverage AI. So, obviously those products are looking a bit different now, but, the mission is still the same.
So you've described a couple of things where you have been a part of, I'm going to call it a startup, the building of organizations.
Yeah.
What's the difficulty in trying to recruit talent for startup organizations?
That's a great question. I think if you have clarity as a company into your why and your what, I think it's not difficult to attract the right talent for your team. I think the challenge that some companies might have, some startups might have, is that they move so fast, they don't really take the time to distill that why in a way that it can connect to people outside of that startup. So then it's difficult to kind of translate what the company does, why they need your skill set, or like even what they're looking for. Sometimes, again, because everything moves so fast in a startup, that clarity is sometimes lacking. And unfortunately, that creates, more challenges down the road. You have that impression that you're moving fast initially, but then you're kind of, always having some hurdles to jump over later on in the process. So I'm a big believer in, taking a little bit of time in the beginning and really aligning, what are we looking for? What do we actually need? What can we offer? And really exactly like what we were talking about earlier, and then jumping into opening that up to the world and seeing, what we can actually attract. Of course, we're always going to have calibration. We're always going to adjust as we go. But I think it's important to start on the right foot there.
I love that, the why and the what, because you've got to have something that is attractive to the kind of talent you want to get. So you have to understand that why and that what, and you got to believe in it, because conviction is everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you do personally to, once you understand the why and the what do you do personally to attract the talent so you can have that initial conversation?
Yeah. Well, then we go into the how, which, if you do have a recruiter or a recruiting team or a recruiting function, someone who does recruiting in your company, they would be the driver of that how, and figuring out what is the sourcing strategy, what is that interview process that would support us uncovering the best talent for this role. So that's where that kind of craft of the recruiting aspect comes into play. And that's really the how of this whole process. I think it's very different in terms of sourcing specifically. So identifying the right talent, that really is dependent on what you're actually looking for. Coming from seniority, from industry experience, from, even some sort of startup experience, if we're talking about startups or maybe big corporations, it really, really depends on what we're looking for. So really architecting back from kind of the goal, and that will give you exactly what you need to to include in your sourcing strategy, and also figure out like, okay, what are the competencies? How do we test for these competencies? And who was the best person on our team to test for those competencies? So the answer is really in the objective, which I find very fascinating. It's just a matter of like, again, taking a little bit of time to think through all of these stages before you jump in.
You mentioned it earlier about how fast AI is just absorbing the world and the attention of everybody. That in itself creates, in my mind, and I mean, I've been a recruiter for 40 years, okay? that challenge in front of me is trying to find the talent that is going to help take Talentbox to the next level. That's hard to find because AI is truly so new. What are you doing to truly dig in to find the talent and the knowledge that you need? I know you talked about building a strategy and so forth, but you've got to know where you're going after this talent, don't you?
Yes, we do. I think there's also, it's important to mention there are certain companies who are focused more on the research side of things when it comes to AI, and also on the kind of production application side of things. We're more in the application side of things. So we wouldn't necessarily be the company looking for a lot of researchers or a lot of people who are in that space. For us, what's important and how we've built our team is really by hiring very strong engineering skill set with the curiosity and the openness to learn and keep learning and staying on top of everything that's happening in the AI space. And I think that's really cool and great for a startup to be an exploration space. I think people, generally tend to get pretty bored if they're doing the same thing, right? So having a space that encourages growth and learning and experimentation, I think has worked really well for us as a company and as a culture to keep growing and keep staying on top of everything ahead of this whole AI craziness.
Well, couple the AI craziness that you just talked about with coming out of COVID, where there is just this whole dilemma on in-office, hybrid, work from home. What's Labelbox's practice today?
Mm-hmm. I love that question because I actually think we found something that works for us, and that would be my recommendation for anyone going through this dilemma. I think there are different companies having different strategies when it comes to return to office and hybrid. But even hybrid, if we just look at the word, it can mean so many different things for pretty much everyone, right? Like, what does hybrid even mean? And that's how we started this conversation internally for ourselves. What does hybrid mean? What does remote mean? And we were remote friendly even before the pandemic. So it wasn't completely new to us. But what was new is really acknowledging that we are operating now in a new reality, during and post-COVID. And we had to adapt to that. So we realized that what was missing for us and what was very beneficial was really that space where we can come together and cooperate and then collaborate. And obviously there's it happens to a degree remotely, but we're still kind of missing that in-person collaboration. So we experimented with different formats. What we landed on was having a annual, we call it a kickoff meeting at the beginning of the year. It's kind of like an internal conference. So it's for a week. We all come together in San Francisco, and it's really a conference. So, we have an agenda. Every team has designated spaces for collaboration, but also for learning. We talk about the plan for the year. What is our roadmap? And that works really well for us to kind of set the tone for the year. And then throughout the year, we have quarterly, we call them co-working weeks. And we do them with kind of regional. So we have employees in Europe, and our secondary hub is in Poland. So everyone from Europe goes to Poland, and everyone from the Americas come to San Francisco, and we try to do them at the same time, specifically for engineering. And again, it's a week where it's really collaboration, figuring out what are the highest priorities, what are the biggest blockers that we can unblock now that we're in person, and really figuring out what are we focusing on next, until the next co-working week. And it's cool because it offers that balance of in-person collaboration, but also space when you can go back home, decompress, and go back to your own working pace, and working from home, working from your couch, from your office, whatever works for you. So it offers a good balance, and the feedback has been positive. So this is the formula that works for us.
Boy, that's phenomenal. How do you maintain accountability as a group? Because our audience is struggling with this trilemma right now. I mean, they really are. It's something you guys really have developed. I mean, trying to move people to San Francisco, even if you wanted to, it's cost prohibitive. So mastering the semi-hybrid, you might say, to remote is working for you guys. How do you manage accountability?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it comes down to, we can bring it back to how we hire. Our core values are craftsmanship, and seek to understand and making customers win. But I think the most important one is really craftsmanship in this case, because we are looking for people who are craftsmen in their area. If we're looking for engineers, we're looking for you to be a craftsman in that area. Same for recruiting. That's how we hire and how we're looking for people. And I think if you are a craftsman, then you do care about your work, and you care about having an impact in your team, in your company, in the industry. And I think that motivates our team quite a bit. And so if the motivation is there, I don't really think we need to focus so much on that accountability on its own. I think if we just talk about accountability on its own, that's not quite a full picture. Because then you're kind of slipping into the micromanagement area, which I'm not a big fan of. So I would much rather make sure that my team is motivated, and they are coming up with ideas on their own, or with projects, or, no one at Labelbox waits for someone else to tell them what to do. Everyone is really, really passionate about what they're doing, and we don't really have that issue of, I'm going to do air quotes, accountability.
No, I love it. I love it because, look, I'm as old school as you can get, okay? I grew up accountable because I was in the office and my boss was right over here. So through COVID and everything, it's changed the world and their work relationships. You hit on something that just really brings the sun up and opens my eyes from the standpoint of hiring people that care, that are passionate about what they're doing. That means something sincerely in accountability, because to your point, if somebody's coming from their passion, this is their focus. They want to make this better than it is, or create something from nothing. And that's profound. It really is. I appreciate that, because hiring people and discovering what they truly care about or what they're passionate about, it's got to be extremely difficult, because today you've got recruiters that are helping you or other people that are masters of saying what you want to hear. And that's a hard thing. How do you discover somebody's passion?
So we actually ask a very innocent question during the interview process. What is your craft? And it can be, in your role, the role that we're talking about, or it can be in your personal life. And actually, it's very interesting. Most candidates actually start sharing about their personal life, whatever they're working on. So we have people that are making jewelry or making furniture, or they're passionate about flying planes and, have built a plane from scratch, for example, or, some very, very interesting things that you would never think about. And I think that you can see the spark when someone is talking about something that they're passionate about versus something that's rehearsed, or maybe it's just an answer to, a classic interview question. So when they're talking about something that they really are truly passionate about, you can see it, and they can go on and on. Like, you need to stop them. You're not asking follow-up questions, and they're just so excited to share that craft and that passion with you. And I think that and that's all we need to know. I think, if someone has that level of passion for something in their life, and, we trust them that they will bring a level of that to their job as well, because they're probably not going to do it if they're just, if they're not passionate about it, right? If they can exhibit that level of passion about something. So that's really been our secret formula, if you will. It's not really rocket science, but it's really tapping into kind of that motivation that we talked a little bit about. And I think for me personally, it's important to connect the dots and make sure that as much as it makes sense for us to bring that person on board, it also makes sense for them to be part of our team, and they are bought into the mission, and we are all, working together towards the same goals. So if we have that, then, the rest are really, really tiny tweaks that we need to worry about.
What a great statement, and I'm excited because I relate to passion. I mean, I raced motorcycles for 57 years. I was passionate about it. I was a recruiter for 40 years. I was passionate about it. But I could never define my passion to somebody. It's just, I loved what I did. And so our audience, I can understand the companies that are in our audience right now, understanding to dig for passion. I can understand the recruiters, both in-house recruiters like yourself, or even external recruiters like myself. Digging for passion, we're not taught. Usually we're handed, somebody in your position, is handed a black and white piece of paper that has, we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this. And you've discovered to take it a whole different level. We need somebody that has a passion for doing something, that has the skills to do what we do. And hopefully those two are in line with each other, because that makes it attractive to you. Now, with AI being this explosion over the last, I'm going to call it 24 months, I mean, it's gaining speed like crazy. Located in San Francisco, which some would argue is literally the hub for technology.
Yes.
What do you feel, not necessarily just your company, because you've done it for other companies, what do you feel an organization needs to offer outside of money, a candidate that we really want to have?
So I think it really, for me, it would be kind of coming back to that initial phase and really being realistic of, hey, this is our position in the market. This is how much we can pay. This is our comp philosophy, right? Like, even if we did want to go after, the top 1% of Google and Facebook and, FANG engineers, realistically, we could not afford them. So let's, not waste our time and focus on what we need and what we can afford, and being realistic about how the market looks for where we are. As a startup specifically, I think it's really crucial to understand where you are in the market. What is your position and what you can offer from that position? We can always go into the conversation of closing and, attracting candidates, but it really, and compensation is part of the conversation always, right? Like, it's a job at the end of the day. So as, passionate as we are, it's still a job. So compensation is a big part. And again, acknowledging that for candidates, taking out the awkwardness of it all, I think that's really worked for us. And really understanding what they are looking for as well. Because sometimes it's not, compensation might be the baseline of that conversation, but maybe they're looking for a remote job and a remote opportunity, right? And maybe now they're being asked to come back to the office, right? Or, maybe it's the industry that they're in. Like, AI is super exciting for, I think, everyone that I talk to in San Francisco, right? And beyond. So if you mention AI, I think everyone is kind of like, oh, that's quite interesting. So really figuring out, like, what is your angle, but from a place of knowing where you stand in the industry, in the market, knowing you as a startup, like, what can you offer? I think that's really, really key. And I think candidates, it really, people are looking for so many different things, as startups and companies are looking for so many different things. So to be able to match 100%, 100% is not realistic, but we're doing a pretty good job, at least, to making sure that what we put out there is true to ourselves. And I think that really does go a long way in attracting the people that would, thrive in such environment or are aligned with what we're looking for. And so it's really a combination of being realistic, but and transparent, I think.
So since you guys have started basically remote and maintained remote all the way through, I think you can answer a question for me for the people that are struggling with remote organizations right now. And that's around training. When you hire somebody, they're going to be remote. They could be, to your point, in Europe, Asia, United States, anywhere. How do you train people in your disciplines? And I'm not talking about just the product. I'm talking about the effectiveness of doing business in your structure and so forth. How do you train them when they are remote? Do you bring them in for training? How do you train new people?
Yeah, I would say the short answer is remote. We do have a blended approach, I would say. Because we're so small, this has worked for us. I don't know if this is going to work necessarily for larger companies. But for startups, I think it's important to look at the employee experience and see what are the points that really need support from the organization, from a learning perspective specifically. So the most important one, I think, is really the onboarding. Like, when you bring a new hire on board, how do you get them to be productive and fully onboarded as soon as possible, right? That's what everyone cares about. So what we did is we have a path that everyone who joins follows, and it's in our learning management system. And it really covers everything that you need to know about Labelbox as a company overall. So very high level, a little bit about our history, a little bit about the space, and with resources. But the idea is to really introduce them to, like, hey, this is Labelbox. This is, who we are, why we're here. This is what we're doing. And depending on the department and team that they're joining, then we have, we call it functional onboarding. And it's really, that's where we rely more on the manager and on the department lead to take that part, because it is specific to their team. And again, they start with a high level of their department. What are the goals for the year? And then, even tools, what tools that you need that they're using, that you need to install, really walking you through everything, like whatever you need to set up and be successful. We walk you through it. And then that curiosity, that seek to understand core value that I mentioned, that really comes into play as well, because, there are some things, we are a startup. Maybe we have a resource that hasn't been updated in a while. We want people, our employees are going to ask, they're going to ping someone, either their manager or me or my team, and say like, hey, this is not up to date because, I read somewhere else or you told me something else. And I'm going to be like, yes, thank you so much for flagging. We will update it when we get the chance, right? So it does, and then you kind of go into that collaboration. So I would say onboarding, and then making sure you have touch points with your employees throughout the employee journey. I think that's important, and it's a great learning opportunity for you as a company, or for me as a talent department. So we do have 30-day check-ins. So the recruiter actually does that 30-day check-in with a new hire because they already had that relationship, right? Throughout the recruiting journey, the candidate experience. Now they moved into this employee experience, but they're still the same people. So we have this check-in, and the recruiter asked them, like, how was your onboarding? How was your manager? Did you get everything you need? How are you feeling? Is this what you expected? As in, have we missold you in any way? Like, were there any discrepancies? And we basically learn from these conversations. And 30-day check-ins. We also do 90-day check-ins, 6-month check-ins as well. And it's all recruiter with their new hires and employees at that point. So it's a really beautiful relationship that transcends, candidate experience to employee experience. And because of that relationship, I think everyone is just so much more open to actually sharing constructive feedback in a safe space. And my team basically, extracts themes from, their conversations and shares it with me and say like, hey, I think we need to revamp our onboarding program, right? Or maybe we need to have a conversation with this manager because they're not really doing onboarding as they should, or, whatever comes up. And I think that cycle really enables us to be more agile in our learning and development approach. And it's very, I want to say, like, specific, to the department, to the team. We're not at that stage where, we can just hire a learning and development person and they're going to create our programming for the year and everyone is going to attend trainings. Like, we just are not there, right? And so we're doing what we can to support our team. But it's been working really well for us in this, micro feedback loops, basically.
So personally, you work from home. You obviously are very passionate and caring about what you do. What do you do? And our audience is going to care not so much about the personal part of it, but for the remote worker. What do you do to let go? What do you do to cleanse your brain of today's activities?
That is a great question. It's been a journey for me personally, I will say. The journey I'm still on actually, is to really figure out and learn more about myself, and specifically, for example, what times I am the most, creative or focused, or when is the best time for me to have meetings, or maybe just be heads down and do a presentation or a proposal or a budget, right? So I learned this about myself over the years, and I'm still tweaking. I don't think this is a one and done situation. But as much as possible, trying to match my schedule with these patterns that I identified for myself. So I can tell you an example. Like, I'm not a morning person by any means. So all of my meetings, so like my one-on-ones, my meetings where I need to be active, are after lunch in the afternoon. mornings, I like to, have my coffee, go through emails, figure out my priorities for the day, really kind of organize my thoughts and, game plan for the day. Then I can go into meetings, then I can go into focus time and, call it a day eventually. So, but it is more difficult than it sounds. I will say that for anyone listening or, aspiring to have this figured out. I still don't have it 100% figured out. And it can change too. It really depends. I do travel quite a bit. So that's also part of, my personal lifestyle. It's a blessing and a curse as well, because, it requires a lot of scheduling and making sure I'm on top of everything that I need to do across different time zones. But that's what, I enjoy doing. And I'm fortunate enough to have the flexibility to do this at Labelbox. So, I think it's really about figuring out what works for you. And as much as possible within, your company, baking that in or aligning that with what you need to do at your company.
Well, Elena, I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time. The thing that I enjoyed about this conversation, number one, is your transparency. I mean, you're just somebody that's like an open book. Here's who I am. Here's what we do. Here's what I do. And it's no wonder why your organization can truly make remote work if everybody is like you within your organization, that's transparent, can share their hearts, can share what's going on. You called it safe. I agree with that statement, that they're not feeling threatened. So thank you for your transparency. Thank you for your smile. Thank you for being so open and taking the time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Of course, it was a pleasure talking to you.